So this is Dr. Alana James. Today is another installment in the Transferable Skills Suite. Very important topic, one that is a key on the list of most employers these days is your ability for planning and project management. The Chinese say, may we live in interesting times. And of course, as a curse, may you live in interesting times. I think actually it's kind of its own blessing as well. But businesses and agencies of all kinds are definitely in some places where the economies are changing, the way they do business is changing, and the skills for planning and project management are key. So the quotes we take into this are Alan Lakin said, planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. So we have to be able to imagine. And then no matter how good we are at planning, the pressure never goes away. Don't fight it. Learn to feed off of it. Ben Carson turned pressure into motivation to do his best. And if you're in a high stakes position, the pressure at sometimes will be extreme. And then it becomes it's like lifting weights. Pressures learn to be dealt with much like we learn to lift broader and broader weights. Allie, welcome. Operations keep the lights on. Strategy provides a light at the end of the tunnel, but project management is the train engine that moves the organization forward. So shifts happen. Academics and non-academics jobs. This is from a research policy journal. The shift in rewards equals the shift in emphasis. In addition to their roles as scientists, PhDs are becoming project managers and administrators to coordinate actors across sectors. These changes might challenge the traditional reward system in public science, and the competencies that research scientists gain from their doctoral education might be expected to partly shift over time from substantive to more general, and transferable skills as management and administration become a larger part of scientific life. That's really what this entire suite of discussions is about. We've chosen 4 consistent topics for the agenda. First, discussing what employers are seen to want from masters and PhDs that they hire on this topic. What's known about it, meaning what does our research say? What you could do in graduate school to build the skill. So that's a section where we typically break the skill down into finite micro steps, and then you can consider those in accordance to your own toolbox of skills. And then we have some other resources for you at the end. So what employers want in the master's or PhD leaders that they hire? Well, this whole topic of planning and project management is one that has had a historical shift in the last 15, 20 years. So the first thing to consider is that it really depends where you stand on a continuum that I will unpack as far as what kind of project management is appropriate, really is determined by the complexity of the task or the situation that you are planning or project managing. So, for instance, it's very different to manage a project. We, the group, the team, want to do X. How are we going to divide it up? Who's going to do what? Okay, how are we going to get it done? Very difficult process than to plan or project manage a crisis. In crisis, you don't have very much time to plan, and you don't have the luxury of having discussions, and you can't come back together and meet a lot. So the things that you have to put in place are moment by moment decisions and communication that's in very real time. Business planning, on the other hand, is long range. You're considering years, you're considering the overarching concerns as we see them now, and you're planning what you tend to do forward, and etc. Performance, more short-term. Communication depends on the number of people that are communicating and what electronic communications are available and the skill level of people in that realm of electronic communication. When we plan training, it has to have a logical progression. We have to think in terms of funneling the learner from a broad-based understanding into the specific understanding that we need, with an outcome or a call to action that lets them know what they're supposed to do next, which is very different from planning an event, which is more of a free-for-all, where you put a lot of things together and let the energy of the people in the event carry forward the possibilities. So very different types of planning, very different types of outcome, each with its own elements, and ultimately its own variables. And so part of planning and project management is to know where you want to go and then to tease out which variables you need to work with. Well, it's also in flux in terms of what's changed. So 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago even, and maybe even now in some parts of the world or in some forms of business, when we would say project management, it would involve 3 steps. Develop an action plan, break the work down into a structure, pass out the structure to different people in a to-do list, and schedule everybody's actions, and then just keep tracking it. And to that end, there are a lot of images, tools. We think, all of you, I'm sure, mind map and use other tools to plan your ideas, and all of these links are to different kinds of project management tools. And when you follow those links, mostly what you're going to see is different kinds of mind maps or ways of putting things together. They were all developed by a group of people or some people in a particular format for a particular industry or reason. I'm sure they all have consultants behind them teaching people how to use them. But at the end of the day, one is probably no better than another, except they're useful. They are the structures, the bones, if you would, that would put the forward movement together. And so if it makes sense to you and it makes sense to the other people, and this particular picture seems to capture where you're going, it's good for the process you're in. I put them all there. So at the point when you're designing projects, you can look them over and decide what you want to use. Now, this, I think, is a beautiful quote. A PhD team leader from a large international engineering consultancy firm pointed out the similarity between experts and doctoral students in their knowledge production process. Most of the projects come to my team because nobody in my company has a clue of how to solve the problems. It means that every time I look at new problems, I know that I do not know the answer, and I also know that nobody in the company knows the answer. And that really, as doctoral students, you will be prepared to take on those kind of problems, because those problems in industry are not very much different than what you have had to go through as you've designed research. It'll be the same steps. It'll be looking to see what other people have written, how other people have measured them, gathering ideas, putting those ideas out to other people, getting feedback, massaging them, having them become solid. If you have a team of people, you do it as a team, and those involve also communication skills and HR skills. But they are, in fact, the seeds of everything you are doing now in your research prepare you to be a good project manager. We know how to embrace the unknown. That's a significant portion of master's and doctoral work, is learning how to embrace the unknown. There's some downsides to this. There used to be the old static way of doing things, and you felt like you had control, and you felt, I remember going to lectures and being told that if I used the fish diagram and if I mapped things out a certain way and I proceeded on that path, that things would work out in a project. And we now know that's not really true. So we now realize that the world of work is complex. And what happens in a complex project is that it can be behind schedule. And often when it is behind schedule, a project manager institutes some kind of a quick fix to get back on schedule. So they might take certain things away from certain people. They might push harder. They might, what else you would know while you're doing what they might do. They might decide that this bit over here isn't as necessary, but getting it done on time is the most necessary thing. Anyway, all of these, instituting a quick fix may often have a detrimental effect to the whole thing. And one of the resources that I give you at the end is a German man. His name is Dorner, probably with an O umlaut. And he did hundreds of simulations of managers who were trying to increase the lifestyle, life quality of a team of people or a village of people in Africa with a certain amount of water, a certain amount of livestock, and a certain amount of structure. All of those things were laid out as part of the simulation. And these teams of managers from well-known companies came together 20 years ago or more. And his research was to give them the simulation and to watch the things they did to help the people grow. And that's what he thought his research was. Well, what happened was that 100% of the teams killed everybody in their villages over time. And instead, his research became what causes failure. This was way before the world talked about complexity. And now we would refocus his words into that verbal structure. But what really happened was that, and I think this is common in work situations, so you have many ongoing projects. One of them is essentially this African village, and you have so many things, and you think it's sort of straightforward. If you do this and this, they're going to have a better lifestyle. And so you put those things in place, and then your attention is taken somewhere else. And because you don't keep the moment-to-moment feedback loops going, you lose track, and before you know it, sure, they've had more water and that has grown more grass, but then the herd's population grew so much they ate all the grass, and now they have no grass. They just have mud, etc. And so things become untenable. Remember, as a project manager, that under pressure, managers tend to make flawed decisions, and those flawed decisions can cause disruption. The outcome of all of that, the best solution anybody has found, although none of this is easy, is to have feedback loops, really good feedback loops. So where does project management go wrong? It may go wrong when the problem you are solving is full of uncertainty, ambiguity, or has some significant political or external changes that are driving it. Those things cause tensions, and if those tensions aren't looked at directly, they can cause the project to go south. If you can't determine the timing, because there's so many people and variables that it's almost impossible to know moment by moment who's doing what or where they are, then that becomes difficult. Or when your end requirements change halfway through, not at all uncommon in today's world, or because you're given a set budget, but you can't really estimate the cost because you can't really estimate the time or the tools that are needed because you're doing things that have never been done before. All of these, trust me, are things that aren't that different from getting your PhD, from doing your research. Those same inherent tensions are very similar. Going to a project team meeting, being completely unsure is very similar to what Nikki talked about with writing and rewriting her findings chapter and then wondering when it was going to be done. The tensions are tensions, and you've learned how to work with them. We've talked in previous slides about what it is to be agile. And in this case, let's talk about personal agility. We could also say flexibility, your ability not to get fussed, to use the Irish term, not to become so tense or stressed that your personality suffers, or that you don't communicate well, or that you don't talk respectfully to the people around you. Your ability to take what is and then replan the next. If you are involved in a big project of any kind, much like many of you have already had happen as part of your research, you would probably, let me ask this to those in the room. Raise your hand if you now know a whole lot of things that you wished you'd known earlier, because it's caused challenges as you went along. Hands go up. It will always be true that when we're involved in big things, it's a learning situation as we go forward. And so this is no different. One thing about being agile is also that you learn to work in sprints. So a sprint is a short period of time with a short focus. Everyone is accountable to that particular small focus if you're working in a team. And you keep having communication until that sprint is over. You don't take on the long-range plans, you take on the short-range sprints. It takes a revamping of your mind because we tend to think in the long term, but it can be very useful in unsure situations, because at least you got that sprint done. You know you finished that. You have some congratulations to your team that much got work done. Otherwise, if you focus only on the long term and the long term keeps changing, morale can go down and people can have difficulty continuing to work well and hard. With sprints come short daily meetings, lots of upbeat energy, the kinds of things that we see when we look at how it is to work at Google or any of those companies. They're based on this. Short, steady, let's keep things going. And then most importantly here is to keep your eye always on the customer, or that's in some situations you could also say outcome. Putting yourself in the shoes of the people who will be using your project. And what they do is they talk about user stories. So that's an appreciative way of thinking for those of you that might be doing appreciative inquiry work, where you are looking for how it feels when to human beings when things go really right. User stories are the ideal case of what you want the user of whatever it is you're building or the project that you're on, how you want that to be at the end. And then you keep driving people in teams towards that appreciative vision. And one final bit here is that there's some competencies that research has shown you'll need to have. So I'd ask you now to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 as to passive empathy. How good are you to anticipate future projects and find some ways to control them? Just a couple of you, if you would put a few numbers in, let me see how probably self-satisfied, let's say, we have in the audience. How good are you, scale of 1 to 5, 5 is the best you could possibly be, at anticipating future projects and events and figuring out how to control them before they actually get there? $2.5. Thank you. Right in the middle, a 3, a 4. So this audience is clustering around the middle. And so what do we do to get better at anticipating future project events? Well, one thing is we may be unsure if we can because we don't do it consciously. So you might decide, I want to up my passive empathy. I have a situation going on where I have to I'm working towards a particular future. Let me think for a minute. Let me write down what I think are going to be the pros and cons I'm faced with, what works for me, what works against me, the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and the SWOT team, threats, that would work. However you use, whatever tools you use this is where I think I'm going, this is what I think will be difficult for me, and this is what I think I can do to overcome that. And then you notice, does it work out that way? If it does work out that way, you can know that actually you're pretty good at this. If it doesn't work out, then you can notice what it is you weren't able to see. You can add that to your bag of tricks. Most importantly, though, your ability to discuss it directly, like I am right now, is a great skill in a job interview. Another one that you'd want to think about is active empathy, to analyze the situations and develop workable solutions. One you see is anticipate future. This is today's situations. So some of us are better when we think about the future. Others are better right now. And some of us are very good at persuading other people or events to go our way, influence our stakeholders. Let me ask, how, if you would again, rate yourself, scale of 1 to 5, on the last one, on your ability to positively influence others. $3.5, 2.5. Thank you for your votes. 3.5. So it has come up a number of times in this series. In fact, almost every set of slides. And so we're putting these together in a boxed set of skills, and I will do some research and writing on persuasiveness, because it turns out that persuasiveness is one of those skills that seems to underpin everything in terms of being effective. So let's look at what research is talking about. I thought this was interesting. This is from a foundation who did some work on what degree qualifications employers can expect through U.S. degrees. And so they would say that a associate level degree allows a student or trains a student to identify and frame a problem or question in a selected area of study to distinguish among the elements of ideas, concepts, theories, and practical approaches. So identify and frame. Now, whereas at the bachelor's level, so 2 more years of education, allows the person to differentiate and evaluate theory, a little more subtle, a little more conceptual, and approaches to selected complex problems within the chosen field, or at least one other field. So a little broader based understanding of theory and complexity, built upon the structures that the associate's degree had with ideas, concepts. And then master's and PhD work refines our ability to disaggregate, reformulate, and adapt ideas, techniques, methods in our field and others. Disaggregate, take apart, reformulate, build new, innovate could be part of that, and adapt. So that is why, in fairness, we should be able to command the higher job placements, because those are very key. But if we don't do it well, we end up like this picture, which I'm relatively sure is altered, because no engineer I know would actually go that far. But Argyris, if you don't know his work from the 1970s to the early 2000s, one of the most pioneering people in organizational development, studying what goes wrong. And what goes wrong is that we don't look, just as I said earlier with the African villages, we don't look closely enough at each little segment of what we do. We don't get the feedback loops right, and then we lose track of things and they go pear-shaped. Project management, looking at this particular is a dissertation, PhD dissertation from Walden University. She examined, talked to project managers, talking about agile versus traditional project management. Her outcome was that there was no broad support for one or the other, because I think people are complex, situations are complex, and it's very difficult to interview 15 or 20 people and have their situations be similar enough that one or the other would always prove to be the best choice. She did find some interesting things, though. Agile project management is consistently thought about now as an alternative, and the critical success factors for it have to do with the overarching management in the company, but beyond that, it still remains unclear. But sustained commitment from upper management is useful and helps out, and so does clear, measurable project goals and objectives. Pretty straightforward in what we would imagine. The other thing that becomes clear as you overview everything that is said about project management is that a whole lot of them are talking about really emotional intelligence tools and skills. So this study from Indiana Wesleyan University explored project management practitioners, excuse me, in terms of their emotional intelligence, used a couple of quantitative surveys, and it said that the conclusion was that project management practitioners are about average in the rest of the population, but that the good ones are better at emotional intelligence skills, and that females generally score higher than males. Apology for the coughing. I seem to have a dry throat. So, is intelligent and emotional intelligence necessary? What do you think, people in the room? If you're working in a project with people, would you consider this one of your top skills that you would want the person to have, that they had some sense of the people that they were working with? And if so, why? as people are typing, this is another PhD dissertation, this time from Capella, looking at emotional intelligence. And they found that adaptable, innovative, and trustworthy were the key personnel competencies that people talked about, but that the ability to understand, or maybe perhaps also the ability to understand organizational politics and to be influential, were keys to success. Olive says that it's a critical skill. It's important to manage personalities by managing your own emotions. I like that, Olive. I think it's very key that it's both us and them we're managing, because it's a dance, isn't it, between us? And if we are good at raising the bar, raising people's, let's just say, joy in working and in getting things done and in having good moments, then things work more smoothly. And so there are many, many ways to do it, and it's a lifetime of learning, but it's very, very important. And once again, it requires a conscious use of influence. We've seen this slide. I keep trying to get rid of it, but each one of our topics seems to end with this idea of influence. But I added some things. This was suggested by some of the other research that I mentioned earlier, and that as PhDs you would understand, to avoid optimism bias in forecasting and cost eliminating. It's very, we want to be positive and we want to think that what we will do work out, but optimism bias needs to be mitigated if possible, and perhaps a team can help us do that. Make sure that those who are responsible for the management understand the project's complexity that's above you and below you. Everybody needs to understand what you think the concerns are and where you think the snags are, and what is going to be hard, so that when it gets hard, they're not surprised. So it's managing people's expectations. And then make sure that in addition to their technical and managerial competencies, all project managers are strong leaders. Adrian says that emotional intelligence key also, because rational decision-making can only come from a place of calmness. Oh, yes. And how nice it is to be able to keep that calmness. Another life path, isn't it? But that's right. And teams can be good for that. A good team can help each other stay calm and help the decisions be rational. If you're not in a good team, consider what you can do to make it a good team, and then consider how much you want to be there at all if there's nothing you can do. Because poor layouts in teams can be completely frustrating to you and not a good ongoing job fit. This is an interesting cluster of skills. They actually started as the skills that you would learn as you were designing and implementing your research, and then just massaged slightly, they became the skills that are needed in planning and project management. They're very, shall we say, close cousins. And what I'm going to do here is I'll read them out loud, but I'm moving it on to this slide. Think of 2 or 3 of these that you know you have, and then please share how your doctoral or master's work has promoted that skill. To defend your choices, to understand timing, to think critically, to pull out interpretations, to see other people's or your own biases or assumptions, How has your doctoral or master's work helped you understand the value of researching what others have done before you go off and do it yourself? Has it made you more able to evaluate and organize ideas, or to present in front of various groups, or to network, or to plan and execute a complex problem, to identify risks, to develop project milestones and hold others to them, to be subordinate, or to be the boss, or to be entrepreneurial as required? Many things require us to be all three. To be able to run the finances of a project, and in order to think more deeply and be more ethical. Now, these are basic skills. I'm sure you all have them, but I think it would be useful not only to yourself, but to yourself to pat yourself on the back that you do have these. So just give us the numbers of the 3 you think are maybe your strongest, that we can celebrate those with you. And then also to consider what portions of this process helped you develop those, that we might reflect ourselves that they helped us develop the same things. So I'll wait for a minute as the people in the room have a chance to put their ideas down. And if you are going for a job interview and you know that project management will be part of it, you should look very carefully at this list and decide on a story that helps the potential employer see your ability to do these things. Because this is the heart of today's discussion. Two, 3, and 4 have been refined by my studies. The others are skills I have to have for running my business in any case. Yes. Okay. So 2, 3, and 4, understanding timing between various types of work, ability to think critically, and to pull out what is interpretation, bias, or assumption from the rest of the thoughts. Or 3, 6, and 8, ability to think critically, ability to evaluate, and to network. Great skills. I know the outcome of my doctoral work was strongest on number 4. The whole, do we have data here question just seems to have been the single thing I understood the most, was why having data was so important. Anybody else have some? Congratulations. Those are great skills. If you can make another, it would be 5. Understand the value of researching what others have done. Absolutely. Looking to the lit. Just having it as a drop dead, this is the way we do life. We have a problem, we go to the lit. And we know what kind of lit is valid, not just the top 10 things that came up on Google. Thinking critically by evaluating and organizing ideas, and then use them to pitch. That's influence. The network, and people listen only if you have something to contribute. Absolutely. Really good conversation, you all. And with that, I think comes this kind of a little bit more subtle, but 12, the ability to be subordinate, to be the boss, or to be entrepreneurial as required. Key skills. So looking into what else might be useful for you, Wikipedia has a good list on management and planning tools. I've given you the link. And Captera did a good comparison on project management software. And Harvard wrote a pretty straightforward treatise on 4 phases of project management. And Erica, situations will make us humble, and then we get better and better at being something other than the boss. Agile Planning has some tools that go with it that you might want to be familiar with. One is called Planning Poker. And another one is there's Scrum Planning. And then there's something called a burn down chart, which sees how you're getting to the task you want to be. Like the candle is burning down to the end. Are you getting there on time? So those are all links. And then I think failure, it's a good thing to learn about failure. And Dorner and Argyris are the best that I've ever come across. You all might have others, but I think Dorner and Argyris are just both mind-boggling at how good they are at understanding why things go bad. And there was also a blog that came up when I did a search that I thought was interesting. So at this point, are there questions? If you're suddenly given a job as a planner or project manager, what out of what we've talked about in terms of what's expected and what skills you need comes to mind? And Adrian points out that Kanban is definitely part of Agile management. For those of you who may not have been attending when we've all first learned, there's a tool. One aspect of it is free. It's called kanbanflow.com. And Kanban is from Japanese, I think, one step at a time, taking one step at a time and growing. And the Kanban Flow tool also incorporates a Pomodoro timer and allows projects to be designed in that one step at a time way. So excellent. You're totally correct, Adrian. All right, so now you've suddenly been hired on as a planner and project manager. What would be your greatest concerns? Is there typing? I think my greatest concerns would be, I guess, assuming that nobody quite knew how to do what we needed to do. My greatest concern would be how big a group, how much time. Those, I think, are the huge pressures. With regard to the thesis, my concerns are keeping it moving. And that would be true of any project. Keeping it moving. Getting it done by the deadline. Bringing the resources to bear that needed to be bare. Nikki, that was a really good answer. Because it ties the world you're in now to the world that a lot of you will be graduating into. So closing off today, how did we do? 1 to 5. Did we talk about planning and project management? Were there tools there you found helpful? Is this a set of slides that you might go back to if you needed to think about something? Was there anything that was provocative or that helped you perhaps think about something you can do to prepare for job interviews? Those kinds of ideas, I think, make the 5. 4 is interesting, kind of well thought out, but not quite sure how it would get to your personal life and when it came to job interviews. 3 is, well, okay, the ideas were good, but the applicability might not be so strong. 2 would be missed the mark, and 1 would be missed it completely. So given that 1 to 5 scale, how would you rate today? Well, thank you. Well, so it was applicable. I'm very pleased. I did some work to bring it home with the asking you to consider what your what skills you had and how it was transferring. When I've looked at the first portion of these slides, I've wondered what I could do to make them the transferable part. Very good. Okay, well, back from travels on a good task. We have 2 or 3 more of these, and I will then also be asking you which kinds of tools and checklists you want, and we'll put them together in a box set that we'll have out at the first of the year. And Adrian, you'll be pleased to know that we are moving towards our videos being tagged so that you'll be able to skip through them more easily, because the webinar videos are long, but people like them. So you'll be able to tag at different times to find them. What's up? Well, Maria's got the groups going and they look fabulous. David is finishing up a really good set of information about learning and what it takes to learn. He kicked it off with a really provocative one on assessment, which actually made me rethink what I thought of assessment. The app is just driving us crazy. I know we promised apps at the beginning of October. And the interface with Apple is much more difficult than the interface with Google. So we'll definitely have the Google app up hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The Apple app might not come up this year. They will want us to, until we see how much the Google app is picked up, and let you as our users come up with what else you want it to do. Because I don't want to put a lot of energy into designing something only to have you, the user, tell me you wanted something different. And Apple really demands a lot more before they'll put it up in the Play Store. But it's coming. Slow process, this one. We do have a number of upcoming webinars. You all know the space. And I hope that you're really enjoying your dissertation and doctoral work and master's work. You know that if you need anything, you write Margie at doctoralnet.com. If you run into any bugs, you write Lorraine at doctoralnet.com. And if you have some guidance criteria issues, you write either myself, Alana, or Maria at doctoralnet.com. We are here to help you. And with that, I will turn off the recording. Bye, everybody who was kind enough to watch. And then those in